Welcome everybody, by the way. Yeah, I'm so glad that you're joining us. Hey, it is Wednesday. I had to look at the date. Wednesday, no, it's 11/11. Rachel told me because it's 11/11, it's like a magical day. And I don't know if that's true, but it's 11/11.
It's Veterans Day.
Yeah, and we are here for day 3 of our November Movement Challenge. I'm Dr. Jason Bradley, the founder of Epic Functional Medicine, of course, and this is our Epic 5 Plan community group. And I'm so glad that you guys are all here and participating. I'm here with our lead health coach, Dan. Is it Tribly?
It is Tribly.
Yep. Good. Because in my head, I think you and I've had this conversation before. I called you Tribly forever because, we never say each other's last names, right?
It's true, actually. I didn't know that.
And so one day you were like, it's Tribly. And then, so that went on for a while. And then I was kind of thinking, I wonder if I made that up. Maybe it's been Tribly the whole time. And anyway, good. Well, nice to meet you officially, Mr. Tribly. Welcome to the team. Some years later. Yeah, we're going to be jumping in today, and again, just kind of recap. Actually, Dan, do you want to do a recap from the week? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. So where we're at so far, those of you who are popping in, checking out these live videos or recordings later on, or if you've been with us from the beginning, just to recap where we've come, where we're at now. So on day 1, back on Monday, we just went over laying down the biggest foundations to set ourselves up for a higher rate of success and consistency when it comes to movement routines and exercise in our lives. And those two things are going back to the big why and talking more in depth about that and why that's different from just, say, feeling motivated or just feeling up for something more. So making sure to revisit that. And then the second part was implementation intentions, which is a specific strategy when it comes to habit creation to make sure that, it's kind of like when we talk about SMART goals at Epic, something that's specific, it's measurable, achievable. But an implementation intention is just where you get clear, especially for movement, when it comes to actually knowing, and you can write it down on paper or tell a friend, I am on these days for this long at this location and for this duration. Because a lot of us maybe have 1 or 2 of those pieces, but not all. And just that alone can raise the odds. We're not going to be, when we do that, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to increase the probability of how consistent we'll be. So that was day 1. Day 2, we talked a little bit more about the best self schedule, which kind of ties into day 1 as well in terms of how we fit that into our time. And then also we took some time to go over the practical tools. The implementation intention actually has nothing to do with what routine or what kind of exercise are you going to do. But we talked a little bit on day 2 just yesterday about some free tools that are out there, exploring a little bit, and then also leaving you guys with some resources in that Facebook post for some other great websites and channels you can check out if you need a little inspiration for just getting started with some kind of movement routine, right? And then you can take time to refine it. So that leads us to day 3. And day 3, we're going to mainly just be talking about more about paying attention to just like how we talk about with diet, or maybe you've heard this before, for those of you who might be newer to the Epic 5 community, like, yeah, you need to pay attention to how your body feels and how it responds to food and listen to your body. Well, that's just as important when it comes to movement. So that's what we want to talk about today. And I think there's something here for everybody when it comes to either if you feel like you need to modify your exercise so that you can meet yourself at your level instead of trying to match whoever you're following on a video or on a sheet of paper. And then also for those of you guys who maybe are veterans when it comes to exercise, you already have a routine, you're pretty deep into that. There's something for here as well when you think about what could overtraining be like. So that's what we're going to just take some time to talk about today. So that's our recap for right now.
I think that's fantastic. And I think that we've nailed down so much, and I think it's interesting because while we did have, a plan of attack this week, which is awesome, sometimes our challenges are we had a topic, but not really as planned as we did. And I'm really digging what we're doing, and it's interesting because Natalie and I last month did a similar dive, and that's how this format started because it was so awesome, into the topic for October, that, you know, we did a super detox, right? We're talking about detox. And it was interesting because every other time that we've done these types of challenges, or at least this type of, I was going to say like an expose on the challenge, it's always been kind of didactic learning, right? I mean, like if you go back to our January and April videos that we were doing for the detox challenge, I mean, it's like biochemistry and some almost genetics sometimes. I mean, it's like some hardcore learning. And those videos, by the way, if you want to watch those, I think that, of course, I think they're interesting because I made a lot of them. So I hope I think they're interesting. But they're on our YouTube channel, and Natalie organized, you know, some of that for us. But what's interesting is last month we didn't do that. We decided to just get together and chat about eating and food and detox, kind of like what we're doing this month with movement. And it's interesting because with Natalie and I independently, you know, and then you and I together, it's interesting. The most important part that we decided to lead with was the headspace, right? And I think that it's one of those missing pieces when we're looking at kind of an overall, I don't want to say health program, but, you know, a better self program, you know, whatever it is. Of course, you know, we love the Epic 5 plan because it's hydration and, you know, eating, you know, so food, movement, stress management, you know, sleep and wake patterning. You know, I think that's a brilliant tool that we can all employ. But, you know, nonetheless, we keep coming back to that commitment. It's once we make that commitment to the other side, when we are able to start breaking down those roadblocks and start to do the things that maybe we know we need to do, but are having a hard time motivating ourselves to get done, right? So we started that day to kind of recap, or the week, with that big why are we doing it? And then moving into some practical implementation. And what I think is cool about the end of the week, I think it's tomorrow, to kind of, here we are today, and we're gonna talk about listening to your body, and all these pieces. And I think tomorrow we start talking about habit stacking and tying this into other aspects of life to make it practical again. Is that right?
I think that'll be day 5.
Well,
Tomorrow
that's day
we'll kind
5.
of talk
I'm
about.
always a day ahead. I did this last time. We're not being like, nope, that's the next day. And, you know, yeah. So yeah. So what's tomorrow then?
Tomorrow we're gonna kind of it's kind of a bonus topic of strength, you know, strength versus cardio, or what about
Nice.
flexibility, balance.
Yeah. Cool.
Sometimes that can be a question people can ponder now that they start thinking about what routine do I want to do, you know, how does that all play in, and is there one that's more important or not? I think it's an interesting question.
I think it's an interesting question too. And what's really curious about that, I know we've kind of been talking about it, and we're talking about movement, but, you know, I just did my Wellness Wednesday recording right before this topic, and I actually did it was about a 20-minute treatise on balance and why it's important, you know. And I think obviously I was influenced by some of the conversations that you and I have had earlier in the week, right? So, you know, I pulled some stats up, and we're going to talk about all that. Great. I forgot that we added that bonus day in. That's great. And then we'll talk about stacking it with habits on Friday and really making it a doable, practical, easy to implement, you know, process, so to speak, right? Which is what I think Epic's pretty notorious for, is taking something as complex as psychological motivation behind exercise and the why and the science, and somehow making it practical and getting our clients to, you know, participate and doing it in the most easy, almost seamless. It's not, you know, it's not that hard. And Dan, you're, you know, one of the big leaders in that area. You have a knack there. We talked about that yesterday a little bit. So yeah, let's jump in. I'll let you run forward with this.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot to say, but I tend to just keep talking. So I'm learning. I know you guys have been with me for a while. You know, I'm learning to kind of turn it back over. So, and it's a skill I'm going to have to figure out when I start doing interviews for the podcast. You know,
yeah, it's true.
Right up. You know, coming right up. So it's because it's tough to turn from teacher to journalist, right? It's in listening instead of teaching. But at any point, let's just jump right in and talk about listening to the body. I'm going to turn it over to you, and let me know how I can weigh in. If I have something super awesome, I'll share it.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So I want to start with, there's a number of different things we want to talk about when it comes to modification. I think and one of those will actually be just to reiterate one of the closing thoughts from yesterday. But before I get to that, I think where a lot of us can come into with movement or exercise is, you know, we start with needing to troubleshoot, right? Like the headspace and some of those barriers there. And then even for a lot of us, even if that we have that a little more figured out, We're getting into it. Maybe we're excited, but then we hit just some of those practical, just physiological roadblocks. Like you start something and then it's like, oh my gosh, now like I threw out my back, or my knees are kind of hurting here and now I'm not sure if I can keep doing this, or oh my goodness, I am so sore. Just these roadblocks come up, and they weren't psychological ones. If you get in your own way, it's just the reality that can happen to our bodies as we're trying to exercise them. And so the first thing, when it comes to modification, this would be pertinent for all of you guys who maybe this will be helpful for those of you in one of two camps. Either number one, it's just been a long time since you've done any kind of like intentional kind of exercise regimen, right? Like you just haven't been exercising beyond just the typical stuff you do day to day or walking around, right? And I think that's true for a lot of us. I know even for me, when I have exercised in the past, sometimes there can be breaks for a year, 2 years or more, where it's like, okay, now I'm doing something more intentional again, a little bit more intensive. So for the folks in that camp, and then also for those who maybe you are regularly exercising, but now you're switching to doing something new and different, and therefore your body's not used to it or trained for it. So in either of those camps, I just encourage all of us to, as you're exploring and practicing a new routine or a layout of exercises that you want to do for whatever that timeline is, right? 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know, is give yourself some space and patience for that first, for those of you who want an exact number, I would say at least 1, maybe even 2 weeks. Give yourself space to go really easy on the exercise. So if you have no prior experience, so you have no reference point of like, how much is too much weight to lift, or how much is, how much is too long to jog, right? If you don't have a reference point, then you could certainly just start with, what does your gut think? Which, some of us trust our guts, some of us hate that concept. But what does your gut say? And then do just 50%, if that, of what your gut says. And I think a lot of times you can approach it, certainly not overdoing it. And if you still overdid it, at least you only 50% overdid instead of 100% overdid it, right? So I think that can be a good approach. Or if you do have previous experience, like man, I haven't lifted, done, I don't know, bicep curls in like 2 years, at least intentionally. But I have records of what I used to lift, and gosh, I figure I'm probably weaker now than I was back then. So let's back it off by 50% and give it a shot. So those are some ways you can just think about it. But if we do that, then you can give yourself time to just, again, I think that keyword is practice. Practice the flow of the routine, because it's new, right? Just like when we try a recipe for the first time, it takes like 2 or 3 times longer to make that recipe than we did a second time, just because we're not used to what the steps are. So just get used to and comfortable with the routine, and then start to more practically, start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do to start pushing myself, and not extremely, but challenging yourself, I think is a good word for it. Giving yourself a good level of challenge. But if we try doing that all at once, like I've got this new routine I'm not used to, I don't even, if somebody asked me what's the next exercise after this first one, I couldn't answer that from the top of my head. I got to look back at my sheet. If you try doing that plus like getting just the right amount of numbers, and it's been a while, then it's probably going to be a little frustrating, so that's not going to help when that creates resistance for us when we're trying to get into exercise in an approachable way. And number 2, we might overdo it, right? And then we can, as all of us have probably experienced one point in time or will, is that first 1 to 2 weeks is just really rough. You just feel so much more sore. And that I usually find that first 2 weeks especially can be the most challenging, even psychologically, to stick with when you're faced with that. I'm not saying that, I know for me, even when I do back off and I just do quote unquote 50% of what I think my body could do, I'll still feel it, but usually I recover so much faster. You know, soreness isn't necessarily something to straight up avoid. Like, it's going to happen. But we need to think about, there's a difference between feeling it the next day versus like feeling like, you know, you just got destroyed. You know, your muscle is so sore for like two days, even 3 days after that point. That's when you know, wow, I overdid it, and back off, let it rest, heal, maybe work on something else. So we're just trying to avoid some of those barriers. You know, just give yourself some love and patience. Feel free to go into it slow, and it's okay. And I think actually a really good and healthy approach. So
too.
Yeah. So that's the first thing when you're getting into that exercise. Now, I actually, before I get, I do want to, so that's kind of the first thing, especially for those of us, again, trying something new, or it's been a while. Maybe we're just newer to doing some form of intentional exercise, or trying something like that. But I want to speak to, you know, talking about soreness. This is something I've found very interesting. So there was a really, and I've got this, there's a lot of great resources that's in this Facebook post for you guys, just for practicum, or just as practical steps you can explore for learning more of how could I modify my movements. And I know it's a big topic, and so I'll try to cover a few things, but I know it probably won't cover nearly all, you know, as much as we could, right? We're all in different places. But let's talk about the other side of the coin. Whether you're new to exercise or you're very experienced and have done all kinds of training, we can overdo it. And this, so let's look at that other extreme. A very influential podcast I listened to, I really should listen to it again. I've recommended to a lot of clients since then, is there's a group called Mind Pump, or they have their podcast side of their site called Mind Pump Media. Kind of a fun group of guys. They're fitness professionals who I think, in my personal opinion, have a really good head on their shoulders when it comes to not just fitness, but holistic health. And a lot of things we talk about here at Epic and in other, you know, or other places, you know, when it comes to functional medicine, holistic health. You know, although their main emphasis is fitness, they also they supplement or support that with making sure to, in their podcasts, you know, talking about or working with their clients about sleep and about diet and all those other things. So they're not just one dimensional. And they have a lot of really good content. It's free. So I recommend them. They do use language though. So if you are around little ones or whatever, just maybe get some earphones on, just as a quick disclaimer. But one podcast, which I have in the notes here, but I want to show you guys, is podcast number 1142. They have a lot of them.
Wow.
Yeah, these guys they're experienced. You know, some are getting into I think they're getting their 30s. One of them maybe in his 40s. You know, they're definitely not the young, like 20-somethings. They're just getting started. So they've got a lot of experience under their belt and a lot of lessons learned too. And so they have this one, number 1142, the 9 signs that you are overtraining. If you are finding, if any of you who are listening to this, joining today or watching this later, have currently or in the past, you know, have kind of come into that issue of like, you know, knowing yourself that you come into exercise and whether at the beginning or later on, you overdo it. This is a podcast for you. And I think it's really worthwhile listen. I've always recommended this podcast whenever I've talked to clients, you know, in like our first appointment, where I hear this pattern a lot. This can be a very common pattern. Specifically, you know, when I'm talking to female clients who have hormonal dysregulation, who also did like train for marathons or did like cross country or other intensive, or like doing like CrossFit intensely for years, you know, that kind of situation. Doesn't mean it can't affect men too, but, you know, just in my current experience. And it's just interesting that, yeah, when you get to the other extreme of overtraining, of over-exercising, you know, because again, everything in moderation, right? that's when you can start to drain your hormones, overproduce cortisol. That steals what you need for other important hormonal chemistry, and then you just get, a lot of stuff starts getting out of
Well,
whack.
and it's interesting there too, because
Yeah.
I can jump in now because it's chemistry, right?
Go for it.
Because when we have that cortisol steal, basically what's happening is the adrenals, are basically taking over and chugging out cortisol. But we see that shift to androgens, because the adrenals also produce DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, and then that DHEA is going to convert into testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, androstenediones, and other types of androgens. And we can see overtraining, like you said, lead to gross hormonal imbalances. And it's interesting. And I hadn't really put this together until just this moment, Dan. And I don't know if this is true, but it's interesting. I did my residency in sports medicine. I don't talk a lot about it because I didn't really do much with it. But when I was there for a few years, I worked with professional athletes specifically, and primarily worked with marathon runners, and primarily female marathon runners, if we really got down to it. I also had a weird little side stint where I was working with a semi-pro hockey league, like a farm league, which is kind of fun. And then somehow I got into the entertainment sports business, where I was working with New York City Ballet and Pilates and some other folks. But nonetheless, and it sounds a lot more prestigious than it was. I learned a lot. It wasn't my bag. I decided that life is a sport. But it's interesting working with a lot of women in those circles, a lot of high performance women, athletic women, and they would have hormonal imbalances. It's interesting because we still kind of work with high performance women with hormonal imbalances. And I think it's probably when I started getting interested in that field. Because the question was, at that time, what can we do with these female athletes to up their game, right? To level them up, if that makes any sense. And, athletes are always thinking that. That's your job, right? It's all that you do, and your entire livelihood depends on your body being the best that it can be, right? So this is why you see athletes being pretty hardcore with, maybe not modern baseball players. I've seen some of those guys, and I don't know. There's some big baseball players these days. That's all I'm saying. But nonetheless, these athletes, they have to train their bodies, keep their bodies this way. And so when their hormones get off, and they don't feel good, we had to go in and figure out how can we help balance this out. So I started, learning much more in thyroid and adrenals and the balance between I don't like these words, but feminizing hormones and masculizing hormones, and how does that work in the male species? How does that work in the female species? And I really think that needing to understand how to help those female clients out ultimately probably led me to functional medicine, because that's what I was looking for. How to help just get the body better. And then I realized as soon as I stepped foot in that camp, I was like, holy cow, this is for everybody. It's not just for, hardcore athletes. So I don't know, I didn't mean to share my story there, but it's an interesting tangential connection to my story of how I got into functional medicine from something like movement and working with those athletes. I also, since I just quickly wanted to say some interesting things about pain. And this has been my experience. I think you summed it up really well. I think there can be some soreness, especially muscular type soreness, not to be confused with joint type soreness. But muscular type soreness, we've all felt it. If we're like, I'm gonna lift 800 pounds with my pecs today, I can't do that, right? But and we're pushing it, and that's like the next day you're like, oh my God, I can't even move my pecs, right? That's overtraining, like Dan was saying. If we're training at that right level, it's okay. And I put that in quotes in my notes. I keep notes on a whiteboard as Dan was chatting. Otherwise, I'd forget my points. But I feel like we're in a political debate, with our lecterns. And, you're talking and I'm keeping my notes, and now I'm talking and you're keeping your notes. And anyway, luckily, those are all over. Pain. It's okay the next day. And Dan's right. Absolutely. If it's more than a day, something went haywire. Either you overtrained, you were dehydrated, depleted of electrolytes. There's a number of things that can be there, but that general slight soreness in the muscles, like I did it yesterday, that's okay. On the flip side, if you're feeling pain in the joints, I just want to be really clear, that's never normal. Pain in the joints is never normal. It means the joint is having damage, okay? Which leads me to the third part of pain. is what I would tell my athletes. While it's okay to have some pain the next day, it's not okay to have pain while you're doing it. If you're having pain doing an activity, listening to your body is the most important thing that you can do, and you need to stop that activity. I mean, that's just what you need to do. You could modify it. There might be some other way to do it, but the way that you're doing it, and certainly don't injure yourself modifying it, right? It's probably better to stop it. That was probably bad advice. I retract that. For the advanced athletes, if you know how to modify, by all means do it, right? But if you don't, just step back from it. You can always go back to it the next day. And if it's still painful, step away from it. And if it continues to do that and be painful, go get it looked at. Pain like that is never normal. It's never normal. It is your body saying something's wrong right now. Don't do any more. You're doing damage at this point, right? So, and I know also in listening to your body, Dan, just kind of getting ready to hand it back to you after one of the points. I think the big thing is that people, I've done this, we overtrain. I mean, I think it's almost easier to overtrain than undertrain when you're starting out, because you have especially if you haven't done anything, and it seems like, I'm making this up, you should be able to go pick up a 5-pound, dumbbell and lift it 150 times. I don't know. That might be impossible. I don't know. I've never done that before. But in your head, you're thinking that, and I could see that that repetitive motion. And then, 5 pounds over 150 times is lifting 750 pounds. Don't forget that, right? So, your muscle, your bicep could be really sore after lifting at 750 pounds and hasn't lifted anything. And you might even get contracture of that muscle, even though it was only 5 pounds that you were lifting, right? So there's so many variables here. And this is what I agree with Dan. Listen to your gut and then do 50%. I think it's a really good point. But I'm going to share something on that, Dan, because you're brilliant. And I want to share with our people how brilliant you are. So hold on one second. Great. Perfect. I just wanted to point out a few things. First of all, I wanted to talk also just quickly that exercise actually changes our gut. It actually changes the microbiome structure of our gut. So exercise is awesome. And in fact, I love this, how it says how it helps us. We don't know yet, right? We don't know. I love this. It's from late last year. So this isn't like, 10 years ago. Like I was talking to Kieran Krishnan the other day, the world expert on the microbiome. And I'm going to quote him. I'm going to say a bad word. So if there's kids around, I'll edit it. I'll edit it. It's better. He said, with all this study in the microbiome and probiotics, I can tell you right now, we don't know poop about the microbiome. And and we're just the tip of the iceberg, right? He didn't say poop. But nonetheless, I like that, our microbes, exercise changes our microbes. It increases the good, healthy, beneficial probiotics that secrete a chemical called N-butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid that's necessary to regulate hormones and immune system, and the list goes on and on and on. So, that's pretty cool, but check this out, listening to your gut, right? Our gut can influence our mood and our thoughts and our brain, and I just wanted to put that out there. And over here this is in Nature Reviews, I want you to read this sentence with me, Dan. Listening to your gut. Growing evidence indicates that the mammalian microbiome can affect behavior, right? So our probiotics, our gut bacteria affects our behavior, affects our brain. Several symbionts even produce neurotransmitters. Let me explain what that means. It means that the gut bacteria, right? The gut bacteria actually produce neurotransmitters. We talked a minute ago how exercise increases those probiotic bacteria to produce N-butyrate, but also feel good. That's why we feel good. It's neurotransmitter, right? One common explanation for these observations is that symbionts, right? Symbionts are like bacteria or parasites or things that would live with us, but aren't killing us, right? They're not, I guess they're not parasites, because parasites live with us, but suck from us. Symbionts live with us, the bacteria, the good bacteria of the body, and thrive while we're thriving, right? So this is what's cool. The symbionts, the good bacteria, have evolved to manipulate host bacteria for their benefit. Let's just really think about the brilliance of Dan Triblee. Listen to your gut. Your gut bacteria wants you to be healthy and survive, and it can even influence your brain behavior on what that means. So if your gut says, I bet I could run super fast for 5 minutes straight. I agree with Dan. Cut it down to 2.5 minutes. Maybe cut it down to 1 minute. Your gut wants to be healthy. but listen to your gut a little bit. Don't go any more than what your gut would say for sure. But again, I don't know if it quite works that way. I don't know if it's quite that one-to-one, but there's a lot of evidence that what we're thinking is related to our gut, and our gut is influenced by our activity levels. And like I said, it really, coming back to like movement's important. We all should be moving. It's more than just physical body stuff. Like we're talking, like you brought up, hormone regularity, right? Mood, neurotransmitters, motivation. There's so much built in. Immune system regulation, going to digestion. I could go on and on. But anyway, that's a different talk for another day. I just wanted you to know that when you said trust your gut, there's a million reasons that I think we're finding the science now behind that cliche. I really think that we're finding the science behind that cliche. So trust your gut. I fully agree. And if it hurts while you're doing it, stop.
Yep.
And if it hurts 2 days later, you did too much.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Just because, like you said, we know that exercise can increase our moods, and there can be various reasons for that. It helps with, cortisol, it helps you give energy, dopamine, but also your gut bacteria. I think it's fascinating.
Well, and it gets rid of catecholamines too, so stress chemistry, right? Mm-hmm. So it gets rid of all of that. It literally burns it off. I think it's, and like you said, it's producing good neurotransmitters, endorphins, feel-good chemistry along the way. So I'm surprised that there aren't more people addicted to exercise, because I think that once you get in that groove, you really look forward to it, and you really do. Once you get in, again, coming back to the pattern, the habit, and everything that we're talking about, once you get in the groove of it, I really think it's something that you really look forward to. At least I do. And again, we talked earlier in the week, I hated exercising, and now I look forward to it because I'm doing things that I love. Instead of things I felt like I had to do, like run, which I don't like running. Rachel's a runner. I'm not. If you see us running together, if you guys know Rachel, anybody's seen her, she's like an elf and I'm like a hobbit. I don't know how else to say it. I'm like the very square, clunky, hairy guy running next to her, and she's like a thin gazelle just like gliding through the air, and it's horrible. I can't keep up with her. But anyway, Dan, I'm rambling. I'm going to turn it right over to you, sir.
All right, man. So, no, that's a really good point. Earlier to what you said about if you're feeling pain, and if it's especially in around your joints, then just stop. Like, there's no judgment to that. And I think that's just another important thing too. When we modify, there is an important headspace piece there of, are you judging yourself? I ought to be able to do more, or, look at what I can't do. And that it's so easy for us to do, but it's just not constructive. You have to remember the other point I want to share in our time today is that to modify, you need to be willing and continue practicing mentally to compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. And the apple is specifically yourself. Compare yourself to yourself and nobody else. That is why that can be one challenge for those of us who don't have as much experience with already knowing how to modify. That can be one challenge when following along with an exercise video. And I don't say that to mean that there's a downside to exercise videos. In fact, that's how I've started and have usually done my exercise. But one thing you can keep your eyes out for is to look for exercise videos or programs that show multiple ways of doing something, because that can help take your mind away from thinking, here's the trainer gal or the trainer guy, look how awesome they are, and gee, I'm not matching that. And that's the only reference point you have. It's hard to be able to keep an open perspective and a mindset of meeting ourselves where our body's at if that's the only example we have. Whereas programs where they show 2, 3, 4, maybe more people, and they're all doing slightly different things, even that alone, even without going into any details of like, how are they doing it? It tells my brain, hey, it's okay to do things differently. And I think that already puts our subconscious, if you will, in a better state to handle modification and be quicker to think and follow along with that. Let alone, of course, seeing examples of, gee, you know, if we're doing, you know, I'm just doing, you know, cliche examples here, you know, if we're doing push-ups, like, you know, here's one person doing the push-up in the you know, the typical standard form. Here's another person doing on their knees. Here's another person, you know, doing knees plus incline onto a chair, and it's even easier. And it can really inspire and help us see those varieties. So that's just a little tip and a little thing to think about, especially with videos too. Do they have multiple people doing it, and or if it's one person throughout the video? And again, this is why easing into a routine that first week or two is important. Is if you're new to a video and you're not sure how they're going to train you and go through it, by going light and hearing how they explain, you might later in a video hear them say, hey, if this is hard, here's how you can modify. But if you go fully into your efforts and maybe overdo it only right after, maybe in a few minutes after in the video, hearing them, here's how you can modify, you're like, oh, too late, I already overdid it. So those are some things to think about there.
And I think that to remember too, that, I mean, the people in those videos, and God bless them that they exist, right? They're usually, not always, but a lot of times, especially if it's a studio set, right?
Right.
That's their job. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, most of us aren't paid to, you know, work out and look good and film videos working out and looking good. And I mean, you know, there's, like I said, thank God for them. But yeah, they've spent years getting to the point where they can even show you with the ease that they do, how to do the exercise. You know, I think a lot of times we take it for granted that it's like, oh, there's a machine, go do it, you know? But I mean, there really is an art to it. And the longer that you do it, the more nuances you pick up. And when you're working with, especially a video, what I love about videos, Dan, too, is that for me, when I'm doing any type of video, whether, I mean, it doesn't matter what type of workout video, you said, you know, when you're listening to it and they say something down, I've totally had that happen. But also, when I go back and do the video again, and especially like the 28th time that I've done it, again, I'll mention yogaburn.com, that we're pretty, you know, you doing that. I hear things that I didn't hear even the first dozen times that I went through the video, where all of a sudden, I mean, because I had finally gotten to that point where, okay, I know what's happening next. I know what to do. I'm not thinking about what am I supposed to do? Where are my arms? What, you know, what am I doing now? Where does that transition to? I have the flow down for the workout, and I'm able to hear those middle pieces. That's really like some hot coaching that's embedded. Once you get past the, what are we doing and how do we do it, into that other area of the nuances, like you said, and you might even not even hear those the first time through, or the 10th time through. If you're like me, I'm very male. I need to hear things dozens of times before it sinks in. You know, just ask Rachel, she'll tell you. But nonetheless, I just wanted to throw that out there. That's great advice. You also mentioned something that I think is interesting, but I have to have you repeat something that you said yesterday, because I'm going to screw it up. What I also like about the choices, different people in different, you know, different ages, different bodies, different sexes, different, you know, whatever it is, different athletic abilities, doing a similar, you know, workout, but in a different way. What I liked about that, I got this idea, because you said choice. You said yesterday or the day before, choice means freedom. And I just wrote, which means this like comfort, right? I don't know what word you used. What was that?
Abundance.
Abundance. Okay, great. So choice, freedom, abundance, right? What's great is if there are choices, subconsciously, what's going to happen instead of the one choice? If there's one choice, we have a black and white, right? Yes or no. That's what it is. I can do it. I can't do it. You know, that I don't like that person. I like that person, right? And hopefully it's not like that. You know, we have 5 people or 3 people or 2 people or 10 people. Our brains subconsciously are wired to say like, oh, I'm in control because I get to make the choice. I get to choose which one of these fits me best. And even though we may not consciously be, Eureka, I'm in control, there's this subconscious thing where all of a sudden, because we're in control, we're drawn to it, right? Instead of, I don't feel in control, I'm going to move away from it. So there's a lot of, subconscious programming that's going on with those choice videos as well. So abundance was the word. But I love that. And, you know, obviously when we feel abundance, we feel full, right? I mean, I like to quote, I'll pass a sec, but I'll quote Mary Poppins, at least the movie. I've never read it. I've only seen the movie, the original movie, right? but there's this great line in there where she says, enough is as good as a feast. And I love that line because, you know, when we have abundance, it really means that we have enough. And guys, I'm telling you, with my history in anthropology and you know, other social type sciences, in addition to all the medical stuff, I think that having that abundance, that those Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those lower needs met, and again, just subconsciously being told, look how in control you are. You get to choose all this. There's so much programming going on there. And I think it's exciting. And I think it's good to know that there's programming going on because you can use that tool to your advantage.
Exactly.
Sorry,
Exactly.
I rambled a little bit, but
You're good.
my Dan knows this. Every time we talk about anything, all that I do in our private meetings for the most part is talk about the psychological implications of what's going on. I think that's what Dan and I do for the most part in our meetings. So at any rate, I'll pass it back to you, sir.
Sure thing. Next, I'm going to go over, so I touched on this earlier about this particular podcast, but just to do a quick overview and its contents as a teaser, and then for those of you who are interested in listening to the full podcast later, would do so. But kind of flipping back to overtraining, we were talking about earlier, or about like, you know, what pain versus discomfort and what's kind of that level and how do I feel for that. So I'm just going to share my screen once more here on that podcast. So in the contents, they actually take really good notes here. In the contents, their 9 pieces are as follows. Number 1, you know, signs that you're overtraining. Number 1, frequent injury or chronic pain. Number 2, extended muscle soreness. So that was when I was explaining that, you know, are you feeling really sore and it's lasting not just maybe the day after the day of, but multiple days, right? Number 3, decreased performance. So that's the interesting thing. And actually what you're saying, Dr. Bradley, like even for an advanced athlete training and always like, how do I up my game? Sometimes upping our game means doing less of the game and giving ourselves a break. And that's hard. That is hard to admit to and do. But yeah, sometimes when we learn how to be more balanced and sometimes being okay to back off, we actually can increase our performance because we just keep going, our performance can decrease. Number 4, insomnia or changes in sleep patterns. So exercise should be either not changing your sleep if you have pretty good sleep or improving it. But if you're seeing the opposite starting to happen, maybe there's something going on there. Number 5, kind of related to other things here, excessive fatigue. Number 6, loss of appetite and cravings. And then number 7, getting sick very easily. Number 8, mood changes, agitation or depression. And number 9, metabolic imbalance. And they say here at the end, taking action, what to do if you have 4 or more of these signs. So these guys, they're like, you know what, maybe, you know, you could be overtraining and it could be less, like it could just be one thing or 2 things you're noticing. But their general advice is, you know, if you're getting if you identify consistently 4 or more of these, probably a pretty strong sign there's definitely overtraining going on. You know, certainly all of us can experience less than 4 of these things, and it may not relate to overtraining and exercise. It could be something else going on. So just want to kind of skim over that real quick. And again, for those of you who are more interested, or if this kind of jives with you of like wanting to have a better understanding on where and how to back off, definitely listen to the full podcast. Dr. Bradley, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have something to add to that? I saw you do your.
I'm just making connections, you know. And first of all, I just want to say thank you again. You come up with some of the coolest websites, you know, and I just love that you do that, you know. You've shared so much with me, and I know other people, and and they're cool. Like, I mean, it's not just like, I found something. Like, I looked at about 4 dozen things, and this is the one that's awesome, and here's why. It's great. I love it. The thing that I want to go back, you know, you have that list. That list is super interesting. Can you pull that back up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Super interesting, as a matter of fact. I had not seen that list quite like this before. And when I look at, you know, that list, and I'm looking at, you know, chronic pain, muscle soreness, decreased performance, insomnia, sleeping problems, fatigue, appetite, you know, even mental health cravings, getting sick easily, mood changes, agitated, depressed, metabolic imbalances. I think if they added probably hormonal imbalances, you know, there's probably there's probably some other things that could be on that list.
Sure.
But ultimately, when I see that list, and it could, and again, the question that we have is what's going on with the overtraining, right? Let me just answer this very quickly.
Yep.
The reason we're sore is because our bodies didn't have the capacity to deal with the load placed upon it. It's called an allostatic load, ALLOSTATIC, allostatic. That allostatic load, we can only handle so much, and then we break. That's just what it's called. It's called an allostatic load. And when we have that overtraining phenomenon, what's happened is we've loaded our bodies too much, right? But when we have that allostatic break, there are certain things that, I mean, we can have an injury. Like it makes perfect sense if you're overtraining and, you know, like you pull a muscle or you know, maybe tear some muscle fibers as you know, because muscle, as we know, has to kind of break and then rebuild, and then it breaks again and then it rebuilds. And that's the way muscle fibers get bigger, right? They're kind of like, what do they say? What am I thinking of, like a tetra, where we break off one head and then a couple more spindles grow, and then we break it off.
Hydra.
A hydra, there we go.
There
Thank you.
go.
I couldn't think of it. Yeah.
Greek mythology.
Yeah, I should know that. It's so sad. Adeline's been studying classic Greek mythology this semester, and all we've been doing is, besides listening to her tell us the stories, watching some really cool animes on Greek mythology. So I should have known that. But anyway, beyond all that, the thing that this list looks like, honestly, we should Google it. Mitochondrial damage or insufficient mitochondrial health. And it's interesting when I say mitochondria, just to, like, people that are listening might not know, mitochondria are what we're going to call an organelle. They are their own living creatures. They are symbionts, like we were talking about before. If you can think of it as like bacteria, but they're not bacteria. They're symbionts. They're living organisms that live inside our cells, right? And they create a chemical called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And ATP is what you and I and everyone else in the world calls energy, right? That's what, so when we're like, when they say things like excessive fatigue, soreness, decreased performance, lack of appetite, depressed, you know, poor metabolism, all of that, every one of those symptoms are related to unhealthy mitochondria. Boy, let me say it correctly. Unhealthy mitochondria, right? And we don't have time to get into this today, but Dan, I'm just going to ask, can you see how that fits into pop quiz, the methylation pathway that we were talking about yesterday, right? And just super interesting stuff that we're connecting here. So I would say I totally agree with this list. I mean, there's no question that I agree with that. Listen to your body. Stop training. You're probably overtraining. But if you are one of those people, it's like, man, I barely did anything, like legitimately. And you talk to me or Dan, and we're like, yeah, it sounds like you did nothing. You know, I mean, because sometimes that, you know, I put my shoes on and walked out to the edge of the driveway and back, and I was wiped out. And I was sore for 5 days. I mean, we've heard stories like this. That's not overtraining. That is something's not working in the mitochondria. Something's not working with the genetics. Something's not working with your methylation pathway. That is probably genetic related, or at least some limitation in that methylation pathway, which again, we don't have time to go into today. But maybe we'll have a methylation challenge one of these months. But I don't even know what that would be. At any rate, I just wanted to share that list looks surprisingly like mitochondria as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really a good point. That's a really good point. And I'd add to that too, that list is kind of showing how most of those things with exercise in balance and in moderation should be the opposite, right? Like we should have, you know, a better sense of like maybe more appetite because their body's like, yeah, let's feed the body and strengthen it, you know. So that's where you could see it can be a switch.
Well, and so, more energy too, if you think about it, because again, where do mitochondria live? They primarily live in muscle fibers because that's where we need them, and the brain and other places too, but in muscle fibers, right?
There's more of them in muscle fiber.
Yeah, there's more of them in muscle fibers, right? So mitochondria will increase if there's the proper allostatic load placed upon it, right? So that's how our body improves. So it's this weird balance between this too much of a load and too little of a load, right? If we do just enough load, the mitochondria will rise to the occasion and actually create more energy, you know, because we have more mitochondria, right? You know, so I mean, that's what you would be thinking. But when we see that with its friend, I'm starting to think that overtraining, I don't know, I'm going to look into this. I bet that overtraining is depleting mitochondrial function. That's my suspicion, which leads us back to, the Epic 5 pillars of nutrition and gut
All that
barriers.
other stuff.
Yeah, methylation. And yeah, it's cool. It's a cool intersection. I'm glad we did this.
Definitely.
Awesome. Dan, we went way longer than we thought we were going to today. And I just want to just kind of give a heads up that we only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure you have time to cover everything you wanted to cover.
Absolutely. A couple of things I'll just wrap up with. So we've covered ways to get started into a new routine, giving yourself patience and some time to practice it. So just a couple other thoughts, especially practical for folks who, they're not the athletic athlete that's training hard and maybe needing to back off, right? I know we've talked about that side of the coin for a while, but let's go back to, the other end of being, more of a beginner, or when you're newer to trying something. And the first thing is, it's one thing that's challenging about giving general recommendations for modification is that depending on the movement, it could be true to say, hey, decrease your range, decrease the range of motion, or like don't go so deep on that squat, for example. But there are other kinds of movements where you don't want to decrease the range, you just want to lighten your load. So it kind of depends on the exercise. I'll give an example. If you're using, let's say you have some weights, you're at a gym, or you have some resistance bands, something for weight training and resistance training, and you're doing, a shoulder press where you start here and then you push up, right? Saying decrease your range of motion is not a good idea, nor does it make sense in this example. If I'm just going like this and back down, I'm not really doing the movement fully and working the muscles that should be worked. Instead, I should lighten my resistance so I can do the full intended exercise and motion as it's designed, instead of creating over time really bad form, right? Because this is different. And if I'm doing higher resistance, than if I'm making sure, can I do the full range? Assuming, of course, too, that you don't have like an injury or something that directly inhibits that range of motion. So think about that. If weight and resistance is involved, then the first and easiest ways to modify is just lighten your load, right? Lighten your load to something easy enough where you feel more confident that you're doing the movement correctly, because form is really important. And again, just this theme about practice. One of the articles that I've posted on Facebook for you guys for this challenge, I think is a really great read. To be honest, I didn't read all of it through. I skimmed it, but it's from that Mind Pump crew I was telling you about. He had a great article explaining about thinking of exercise as a skill to practice and hone. And that's such a good, healthy mindset, because if we think about practicing something, then we think more about how is my form? How is my skill with executing this motion the way it's supposed to and intended, instead of being so bent on what are my numbers, what are the results? Because if we get too focused on the numbers and results, especially when we're newer to this, it's so much easier to, again, not only overtrain, but maybe develop some bad habits where we do motions in the way that they aren't supposed to be done, which can insidiously over time lead to small, either major or even minor injuries, tendonitis or whatever, right? So think about, how is my form? And for some of us, we have, some of us just have a knack for being really aware of where our body is positioned in space. Some of us have a natural talent for that, but even if you do or you don't, it can be a skill to hone and develop. If you feel you need more support in this is where having a buddy can be so invaluable. Or even if that person's not exercising with you, but you're like, hey, can you just, I'm not sure if I'm doing this movement quite right. It feels like I'm doing it right, but can you look and see how I'm doing this and just give me some feedback? That can be super invaluable, especially if it's, you can't get your eyes on some part of your body, right? So get a buddy to spot check with you, especially if you don't have the resources or the time to, invest in like a trainer. And also having some kind of a mirror can be helpful too, so that you can see yourself and be like, you know what? You do a motion, maybe you're doing a motion that's not weight resistance, right? Maybe you're like, okay, I'm doing a push-up posture and I think I'm doing it right. And mentally you're like, this is how I picture how I'm shaped and how my body is in space. And then turn and look at the mirror. How well do they line up? And that can be a simple, if you don't have a person who can spot check you, then using a mirror could be a great tool for that as well.
Great idea. Every time I look in the mirror, I will let you guys know I never look like I think I do in my head.
I know, right? Yeah.
I won't be too funny about it, but I mean, there are times where I think I'm like perfectly balanced, and I'll look in the mirror and I've got like one arm up here and the other arm's down here and my head's cocked to the side and my hips over here. And I'm like, how? I'm thinking I'm like right there,
Right.
and it's like, what am I doing? And,
Yep.
and I don't know if you do this, but I tend to work out, not my hits or anything, but, I tend to work out with my eyes closed. I don't know why. I lift weights with my eyes closed a lot. I use I do it very safely. I don't know why I do this. I don't run with my eyes closed. I don't bike with my eyes closed. So I guess it's
That's good.
But I do a lot of yoga with my eyes closed.
Sure.
I don't know why. I just do. I kind of go internal. I'm just now realizing that. But I think looking in the mirror is great. It's a really solid point. And it's one of those things that you might not think to do, and it's such an easy hack. I mean, if you see your body like this, just realize that you don't want to be like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science. I mean, don't think too hard. Seriously, I think we
exactly.
overthink.
And the key with that is, let's say you're in that moment and you're like, oh my gosh, that is not how I thought I was positioned. Again, practice that mindset of curiosity and interest instead of self-judgment. Be like, that's interesting. It doesn't feel like that, but that's how I am. So what happened, have more of an objective mindset there. And that's just going to, again, give you grace and patience through the journey. So So as we start to wrap up, I was just going to say, what should we do right now, or what's next? I know we've covered a lot, and there's a lot that people can be working on. So some of you might be like, I'm still getting through day number 1. So if that's you, that's okay. But for when you get ready for what we have for you here on day 3, again, there's a number of resources I've alluded to or given you guys a sneak peek on. Take a look through those, read through them. There are a couple others on there. Like I saw a really neat YouTube channel for a lady who's specializing in showing videos on how to modify if you're overweight or plus sized, and there's just a different approach to that that it can be hard for somebody to emulate. And so I thought that was a really interesting resource. There's also as well gosh, I am spacing out here. Oh, yeah. And then another blog article that talked about some of those general things to keep in mind for modification. I actually had a pretty good general description, and that's also where I learned and shared with you guys today, like, when is it appropriate to limit range of motion or not? So check out some of those resources for further learning. In the meantime, just want you guys to think about, what is an exercise that you need help to modify or to better suit your current skill level and fitness? And just encourage you guys, post that in the comments below. And we can all, as a Epic 5 community Facebook group, try to help each other and share on that. So anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Bradley, before we wrap up today?
No, I think that you nailed it. I just saw these comments that were coming in. Guys, I'm so bad at just seeing the comments. I just now saw it, but yeah, thank you guys for participating. I'm loving this, Dan. This has really helped me this week as well, just kind of realign with the purpose behind movement. And I really appreciate that we took some time to do that. I'm excited that tomorrow, again, what do we work? They have their assignment, and then tomorrow we're going to jump into?
Tomorrow we're going to jump into strength versus cardio. Nice. And what about flexibility, and where does that all fit in?
And balance too. And then Friday we'll talk about habit stacking and then taking some next steps. And then again, just I know that you guys already know this, but We just appreciate you guys being here. Our whole impetus at Epic is just to help you guys have the tools and resources that you need to live the healthiest and happiest life possible. And you know, there's just so many ways to participate. Of course, this group, we have found in our groups, though, it's just, I don't want this statement to be true, but it's true. The people that tend to participate the most in the groups, besides getting the most out of it, tend to actually do better than the people that don't participate. I just want to put that out there. So if you're new to the group, use it. There is a boatload of information here, and there are some really highly qualified and amazing people in this group. It's not just the Epic providers. We've got a bunch of our doctor friends and scientist friends that are in here that can help. So if anybody has questions, ask them here. I like to help that way. If you're, been following us for a while, we'll be, I think, hopefully if we don't already have it done, we'll have the December challenge, date set up that people can register. So, if you've been following us, you want to keep doing this, be sure to register month to month. We have something coming up on now the second full week of each month. So I'm super excited about that. And then last but not least, for those of you that have either been following us for a while and are ready to, have a conversation and take it to the next level, or I know a lot of you guys were referred in, invited into this group by friends, and you're just figuring out who we are and you want to know more about what we do, what we can help, who we serve, all of that. You can schedule an appointment. Every single person that's in this group, not even just you don't even have to be registered for this, but if you're in the Epic 5 plan group, every single one of you has the opportunity to chat with our nurse enrollment coordinator. She can chat with you guys about what we do, how we can help. And really what she does is talk about roadblocks. Here's where I am. I want to be here. Here's my roadblocks that I can't seem to get through. And she can chat with you how we can help with those roadblocks. And here's the cool thing. If we can't help, and Dan already knows this and our clients already know this, if we can't help with certain roadblocks or all the roadblocks, we're going to tell you exactly where to go and who to talk to. Because like I said, our whole purpose at Epic is just to help the world in as much way as we can to be the healthiest and happiest it can be. I believe firmly in my heart that if we all were healthier and happier, the world would be a better place. And I think that we can lean in and take some control there. So I appreciate you guys joining. Invite your friends, invite your family. I want to make this group the place to go for real health information. I'm part of other groups out there, Dan, and I'll tell you, it's a sad, sad, sad world out there. There's so much misinformation, and I don't want to go down that road. But I would just say, kind of in closure, thank you guys again for coming. Invite your friends and family. Let's help grow this group and get some real, practical, implementable change in the world that we can all do, and then help our friends and family do as well. So thank you guys. We'll see you.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That is it. So.
Awesome. I'll say bye, and then I'll let you say bye. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same channel. Dan?
Yeah, take care, everybody. And, Kelsey, Robin, and also Melissa, thanks for joining us live as well. Hope there was something valuable for you guys here too. We really appreciate you. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.